Hello, Space Commander. How's it going?
So I'm a bit late.
That's all good.
Really
You
well.
lose track of time when you're out in space, I suppose.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time and money to make things look this cheap.
Yeah. Well, welcome back. We're on part 2 of our walkthrough Action Force, Palitoy Action Force. Still going through the box of stuff that you've sent my way, and yeah, I'm looking forward to learning some more. So when we left off, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I did have a quick look at the last video, not for any narcissistic reasons, but to try and refresh my memory of what we'd gone over, and I've decided I've got to try and make sure that my microphone is facing around the right way. That would help.
Yeah.
And also I've got to try not to say "don't pull their punches" quite as often as I did on the last one.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
I've also dug out a few choice items. So instead of just reacting to what you're showing me, I can lift up a few props and show stuff to the audience. So hopefully it'll work.
I'm looking forward to it. I had a better night's sleep last night than the last time we caught up. No Hasbro Pulse was keeping me up until 3 in the morning or whatever it was last time. I'm still not a very good morning person, but I'm more awake this time than I was last time.
Yeah, you're more awake than I would be. I'm the worst morning person.
Well, it must look like nighttime all the time, or when you're up there.
Yeah, it does get confusing.
All right, so look, I'll remind you of the where we were going to leap off from the last time, and we were having a look at this character here, and the note that you gave me for this guy, it says Mutton, the enemy. Am I pronouncing that right? Mutton?
In a way. I was going to tell you this story because this guy's actually called Muton.
Muton.
However, that's right.
Yeah.
However, I was on eBay once. I'd found a seller who was selling some cool old Palitoy Action Force, and a lot of his figures had views on them. People had bid early on several of them, except for this guy. And I thought, this guy's a popular villain. Why is no one bidding on this guy? And then I realized the guy had actually spelt it wrong. He'd spelt it as mutton,
right?
Which is like old dead sheep, isn't it?
Yeah.
All
those mutton chops that you have.
For mutton.
That's right. That's it. The mutton chops. That's why I thought maybe it was named after you. So it says, sadly missing his head-mounted cannon, dish, and laser scope, hence the 3 pegs.
Yes.
Right.
For my first prop.
Right. Hang on. Let me just hold that there for a second. I'm gonna go have a closer look at this fella.
Well.
That is very interesting.
This is my older brother's. This is one of the first Action Force figures he bought. He bought them before my younger brother and I got ours. We saw his and we just thought, these are so cool. We started to make our own. But he bought this figure and the SAS roughly the same time. And at first glance, this like I said last time, they were in such a hurry to crank out new characters because the range took off so quickly. They had to sort of kit bash a lot of characters from other parts. And if we see on your figure, basically it's a repurposed deep sea diver. He's wearing the diving gear, just painted black and red for the Red Shadows colors. The diving helmet, the face inside the helmet has been replaced with the big plug, and then or big socket, I should say. Sorry. So I work for an engineering company. I should know the difference between plugs and sockets, shouldn't I? So he's got a big socket in the middle of his face, and that's kind of like his sort of his Cyclops eye. It's sort of hinted at that is he a robot, or is he a mutant? Is he some kind of cyborg? They kind of hint at what he might actually be during the comic book, but they never go into too much detail about Muton. But as you can see, when you first glance at it, because he's got this cool kind of laser scope across the front of his face, cannon on the other side, and the dish on top. At first glance, it's not immediately obvious that his head is a round fishbowl shape. It's only when you take the parts off that you can really see, oh, wait a minute, it's the deep sea diver redone as another character. So I think they were quite clever to come up with stuff like this, sort of on the fly, in order to meet demand. Sadly, a lot of these, when they come up secondhand, as I said in the last video, I was buying up like job lots of used and secondhand figures to send you for our little project that we're looking at. And a lot of the Mutons you see don't have the extra parts, unfortunately. But I'll keep my eyes peeled. If I see any, I'll send them over.
Well, when I first laid eyes on this guy, and having no real experience with Palitoy Action Force at all, it didn't occur to me that there was necessarily anything that needed to be attached to it. So it kind of reminds me of one of those. Is it a depth charge mine? Are they the ones that sort of have like the spiky edges on them? And it kind of reminded me of one of those. But it also occurred to me that it could be like I guess a scare tactic or something against the enemy, where you'd walk into battle wearing this thing and have like black smoke bellowing out from the sides and the top of this thing, just to really give it that scary appearance. But I had no idea it was going to have a gun on his head, a scope, and a radar dish. It would never have occurred to me. Never, not in a million years.
Well, in the in some of the early comics, he did appear without any of that. I don't know if they had sort of sent over to the artists some early figures or early production photos without those parts,
right?
Or if they just didn't know it was meant to come with parts. But in a couple of his early appearances, he doesn't actually have those attachments. He just has a head like this.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, I have seen online some people have kind of made up their own sort of attachments and different weapons, and for different missions. Some people have made like kind of space gear to attach to his head, or underwater gear. Lots of little ideas.
Cool.
But yeah, he does, because he's got that kind of. But because the figure was originally inspired by those early deep sea diving costumes, he does have that kind of old used technology kind of appearance about him. So yeah, he does look kind of steampunk. You could imagine him with like a plume of railway locomotive smoke billowing out of the top of his head as he charges into battle. They actually, in one of the audio cassettes, sorry, all my props are floating about in the 0G. Here we go. So we didn't have a movie or anything like that to watch, but we had audio tapes, and on that particular tape, they need to attack sort of an automated satellite weapon which belongs to the Baron, and they need to fool its security system into accepting the saboteur into its midst. So they actually have a guy from Action Force, from Space Force specifically, dress up in a Muton suit. They refer to it as a suit. So again, you're never sure, was there a robot in it to begin with? Was there a person in it? Was there a cyborg? Is the suit part of the machinery worn by someone, or is it a machine unto itself? So they kind of give you these little hints, the mystery. No one ever actually explains what it is.
Love it. I love the mystery around it.
Sometimes not knowing is better.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll move on from Muton. What a great character. Great character. Great looking character too. So did the deep sea diver have those ports or plugs as well, or no?
No. He just had the open apertures. You'll actually further down the box, you'll find something that you'll find you spinning out the mystery of how the Muton is formed from another figure.
And there we are. All right, I'll. That's part of it. Part of this is learning as we go. And you can tell I haven't dug into the box end because I have no idea. All right, so we're going to go from something that's quite out there, as far as I imagine Palitoy is concerned, to this quite unassuming fellow. And this, you've got down here, Mail Away Commander Z-Force.
Yes. The first of the mail away figures that Palitoy did, same as with Action Man, you could save up these little medals, little medal tokens on the back of the packets and send them in. G.I. Joe did the same thing with their range. Excuse me. But yes, you could send off and get the Action Force Commander, who is basically the same as this figure here, but with a gold trim around the hat. And then they once the individual teams took off, they then re-released that character, but this time without the gold trim, in a more sort of traditional Z-Force red and green color. And this was the result. This is the character you can mail away for. They actually did a couple of variants of this figure. Hold on just a sec.
Sure. It's actually interesting to know that they Action Force were doing mailaways, well before G.I. Joe were doing them. My favorite mailaway is a little bit obvious, but yeah, it's the mailaway gimmick was already what's the word I'm looking for? The mailaway gimmick was already
prevalent.
Yeah. Is that what I'm trying to say?
I don't know.
It was already there.
Yeah. Previously
they
established.
Already had a mail. Right. They'd established the yeah. All right. I'm gonna let that one go.
Okay.
Oh, let me bring you up to full screen so I can have a look. Oh, I see. The hat's got the gold in the center there.
Right. The one in the middle was the first mail away character with the gold hat. The other two guys have got the red, just plain red hat. They're the Z-Force guys, which came out a little while later. But there is a variant of the figure. I don't know how well this will show up on the camera, but it would help if I turn them towards the camera a bit, wouldn't it? So the one near my thumb, this guy here, you can see he's got quite a plain top on. He's quite smooth looking. This gentleman here, he's actually got molded into the plastic on his front. He's got like, I think it's like maybe a medal. He's got some zips there, a pocket.
Right. Yeah.
He's got a collar with like a jumper underneath. The other guy is kind of like, looks like he's got a gaiter or something around his neck.
Gotcha.
But this guy's got a proper collar. So yeah, as little kids, we weren't aware that there were different variants. We didn't know what variants were. But later on, years later, when you start to sort of realize how horrible the real world is, and you start to go back to your childhood hobbies, looking for some of that lost innocence, you discover, oh wait a minute, this guy looks different from the one I had when I was a kid, and you start picking up all these variants, and he was one of them. So
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Part of the fun of being an adult collector is going back and researching some of the stuff that you may never have known as a kid. There's a lot of variations even in G.I. Joe that I would never have been aware of. Like, and as well as the exclusives that were available to certain regions. We had Tiger Force stuff that America didn't have. And we didn't know that because we just had it. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know what it was. We didn't have the power of the internet to tell us what was rare or not rare or had made up value. We were just picking up whatever looked good at the time and didn't give it a second thought. I don't think, until the internet came along, I don't think a lot of people knew about different country regions variations of any of the action figures, unless you'd been to the other countries and found them yourselves. But yeah, now just the internet opens up a whole world of things. Some of them good, some of them not so good.
Yeah. I remember when you and I first got talking, I said, "Oh no, I don't do any anti-social media."
Yeah.
So we just got talking over Action Force and GI Joe, and talking over the video streams, and that's how we got where we are today.
This is where we are. It's a shame you don't have Facebook though, because I'm always posting something to do with Space Commander on the Facebook group.
Mrs. Space Commander has Facebook, so I'll have a word with her. Maybe
Yeah. Bye.
Look it up.
Alrighty, I'm just setting up this next guy. This guy looks pretty cool. If I could just get him. Now I had a moment before we started where I knocked the table because there's a gap between the wall and the table that I'm sitting at, and I knocked over Muton beside the side of the table here, and I couldn't reach with my arm, so I had to grab the tongs out of the kitchen and reach down. Yeah, was not fun. Anyway, so we got here Commando SAS Force. He's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, that just reminded me the idea of Muton getting knocked about.
Yeah.
Back in the old days on the Blood for the Baron website, back in the good old days, there was a there was a story on there. Some guy every year he would because in the comics the Muton was indestructible. I think one of the very first comic strips he was in, he's seen walking down a street carrying this huge bomb. Don't go near him.
Right.
It's going to blow up a huge bomb. So one of the guys on Blood for the Baron used to tie him every year. We have a bonfire night, Guy Fawkes night over here in November, and every year he would tie Muton to a firework, launch him into the sky. The firework would explode. Then later on they'd retrieve Muton, and he was always fine. That's one of the cool things about because the plastic. You may have noticed the plastic of these is ever so slightly pliable. And again, not to besmirch GI Joe. A lot of people will have like a Action Force versus GI Joe nonsense going on. But some of the GI Joe figures, after a while, the plastic, because it's very kind of well, not brittle, but it's not all that pliable either. And some of the GI Joes we had as kids have some of them plastic has crumbled away. But with most of our Action Force figures, they're all still intact. You could I remember one guy talking about when he was a kid chucking them at the wall when if there was an explosion, he'd chuck them at the wall and they would bounce off and be absolutely fine. I remember seeing online someone complaining, "Oh, it feels like the plastic is cheap," and yet all these years later, I've only got one Action Force figure which is broken because they've got one weak spot where the legs. There's a pin that goes through from the legs,
right?
And sometimes that pin is cracked, so you might get one with a loose leg or a leg falling off. And I've only got one of those out of my whole collection. The idea of Muton taking a beating and coming back from it without any problems whatsoever, that's perfectly normal for him.
What an excellent tradition. Yeah, they don't look like they don't feel like they're going to lose any thumbs or limbs or anything. They look durable, rubbery in comparison to it's. And you know what's funny is that you call GI Joe the bendy figures, but and obviously that's just because the limbs would bend at the elbows and the knees. But these Action Force guys are a little rubbery and possibly more bendy, really, in comparison.
Yeah. As I said in the last video, when they started to introduce the Hasbro figures, we didn't really know. As kids, we didn't know the whys and wherefores of that. Because of they had more articulation. Kids, we just referred to them as the bendy figures. But yeah, you're quite right. These guys are slightly bendy in their own way.
Yeah.
Okay, so this gentleman here.
Yep.
He is. I should just another thing that I forgot to mention in the last video was as I said, the first year of Action Force, all of the figures were meant to be sort of shrunk down versions of Action Man, so they
Right.
didn't have their own sort of identity. When they introduced the teams idea the following year, these were all meant to be individual characters. So when we started off last week looking at Space Commander, and on the front of his packet, that's his title, Space Commander, so that the characters will have their sort of job, their title on the front of the card back. On the reverse, it would have like the code name and their sort of listed file name. So this guy is one of the SAS commandos. They look very similar. So if I just quickly check that wonderful book I was showing you last week, just to make sure I get this the right way around. Okay, so he's got camouflage arms and camouflage legs. That means he is quickfire. Hans Mueller. So again, going with the international heroes kind of theme, although the SAS started out as like a British military unit, in Action Force, once they started to put the special teams together, they wanted the best of the best from all around the world. So this gentleman comes from Germany, and there were several of these commando figures that they put out. The commando always has this cool kind of little woolly cap on. But there was a Z Force 1 in the bright green and black of Z Force. There was a couple of different SAS Force ones, and you can tell them apart because either the mold that he was made from is slightly different, or the paint application is slightly different. In the first year of Action Force, when they were all Action Man, there was a commando in that set as well. Again, similar mold to this one, similar hat and everything. So yeah, this is one of our international chums.
I'll just bring him up a bit closer so I can see his woolly cap and his camouflage. Yeah, he looks very cool. Very cool. So it's funny that you mentioned the original Action Man and how they're supposed to look all the same, and these are supposed to be shrunk down, because the next one that I was looking at as you were saying that gave me the vibe of the original G.I. Joe. Like, I don't know much about Action Force, as I've already mentioned, but I know a little bit about the original G.I. Joe, and this guy gave me that vibe. I'll just put him up on the... He gave me a very G.I. Joe-ish, classic G.I. Joe doll size vibe. Let's have a look, see if I can keep him standing. He looks a bit sad there, actually, doesn't he? He's a little bit hunched over.
Okay, this one's actually.
Let me see if give him his... Hang on a sec. Let me see if I can give him some... Let's have a look here. No, like he's going to fall right down behind there. That's a little better. All right, so it says... actually, this one... Do you want me to read out what you said on this one? It's quite a list of things on here. So it's got Eagle's dad, the first Eagle. I brought this from a customer. No, you bought this from a customizer.
Yeah.
Who had given him the eyes, logo, and tracksuit of Action Man's Atomic Man. I removed the logo, restored the eyes, and kept the tracksuit, providing us with our retired SAS officer. Very cool. Very cool.
Yep. The customizer, I'll have to... I think his name was Bron77, but I'm not sure. So what I'll do is, you know how when you get on camera and you forget everything you were going to say?
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll get the guy's name, I'll make sure that I've got the name correct. And if you wouldn't mind flashing his name up on the screen or something when you put it together.
Yeah.
I bought it from a customizer on eBay, and as much as I felt bad removing the deco he had put on the character, because he's obviously put some hard work and effort into doing so. At the same time, my efforts at customization as I said the other day, my ambition and my creativity is my imagination far exceeds my ability to actually achieve. My missus has banned me from making model kits because I start them and I'm always so excited and wonderful, and about 3/4 of the way through, I just end up, in a complete mess, glue everywhere, paint all over the place. You're not doing that anymore, she says.
I was like that with
this guy,
Warhammer Gaming. I would get a bunch of models with the intent of painting them all up and using them for warfare. And they just had boxes and boxes of them, unopened boxes of them, hundreds of dollars spent but never used. Yeah.
So Atomic Man, one of the Action Man figures from the 70s, he had like a bird logo. Sorry, forgetting the microphone again. I just punched it. Sorry, forgive me.
Testing.
Yeah. He had a bird logo on one side of his chest, and sort of like I guess it was a cybernetic eye. One of his eyes was painted like a crazy kind of blue color. So all I did really was I just took the bird logo off and painted the eye black again, because really with the project that you and I are looking at doing, as I mentioned previously, I was kind of wanting to bring sort of the original Action Force, the Hasbro Action Force, and G.I. Joe together in a way, have all these characters in a cohesive story together. And part of that is finding a way to involve not only the old school fans like you and I, but giving an opening there that a younger fan could use to get involved if he or she wanted to. So when I started looking at doing the original version of this project many years ago, working pretty much just by myself, one of the things I wanted to do was use the character of Eagle, who was kind of like he and Skip from Z-Force. They were kind of the main characters in the comic book Battle Action Force, and they were the kind of like the most realistic ones. They were like, sort of real life military kind of officers. And focusing on Eagle, I kind of felt I want to involve the same character that we had when I was a kid. Use that character so that there's some familiarity there for those of us who were around back then, but at the same time have a new version of the character who can provide a conduit for a younger audience. And I didn't want to do what so many people in pop culture at the moment are doing, whereby they'll take a character that my generation loved, and they'll say, "Oh, actually, this guy didn't achieve all those wonderful things you thought he did. He's actually a failure." Or they'll bring him back, and then they'll bring him back and then just kill him off like he meant nothing. I hate that. So what I wanted to do with this character was have an older version of Eagle who will be the Eagle for my generation, and still have him be a part of the story and still be an important part, and he'll be a conduit for some of the drama going forward. At the same time, introduce the son of Eagle, and this guy will be the Eagle going forward for the younger audience. And as I mentioned just now, when they introduced the various teams of Action Force, everyone had their own individual code name and their real name. So what I'm going to suggest is that this character here, he's going to represent the original Eagle for us. No longer in Action Force at the moment, although that can change, of course. He has a reason for traveling around the world and going on adventures, which will be covered when the project gets going. So I want him to look cool, like he's wearing some kind of activity suit or a jumpsuit or something. So this is perfect for him. He's not wearing any other kind of hat or epaulets or anything like that as part of a uniform. It's just him in his survival gear, basically. And this will represent the original Eagle, who was he was called Charles Richard Buckingham, also known as Rob Buckingham in the comics. He was he was a hereditary earl, so the Earl of Buckingham. I think that sounds pretty cool.
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
So what we're going to do is the code name Eagle will pass to his son, the new Eagle. But
Yeah.
Buckingham, this guy, will still be a major part of the story. So although he's not using the Eagle code name anymore, the Eagle code name is going to go to his son. This guy will still be the classic Buckingham that we all knew and loved from back in the old days. And
Right.
they're going to have their relationship is going to be a positive one and a good one, an important part of the story. Because how often nowadays do we have
Yeah.
these awful Hollywood films and TV shows saying, "Oh, your dad was evil. Why do you look
Right.
up to your dad with this important influence in your life?" Okay, some people do have a terrible relationship with their parents, but for so many more, it's the guiding light of their life.
Yeah.
So to just come out and say all dads are evil, get rid of father figures, get rid of them all. We don't need them. You know, yeah, we do. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have a strong relationship between the classic Buckingham, the classic Eagle, and the new Eagle, and the relationship is a big part of the first story, the initial story, and it's what brings the new Eagle into contact with some other characters, some characters
Yeah.
that you will be more familiar with than I.
Sure.
So
Actually, I'm gonna grab something real quick. Hang on a second. It's funny. It's funny how you mention how Action Force and GI Joe could be cohesive, and I know there are some that don't think that they gel too well together due to the differences in playability. If you got you don't have the bendiness of a GI Joe necessarily in the original Palitoy stuff, but as a kid, we didn't. My brothers and I didn't really mind mixing and matching toy lines anyway. So even if we had, well, if I had access to Palitoy Action Force and had GI Joe as well, we wouldn't have minded putting them together anyway. Like we probably would have if we had that opportunity to. We were using Star Wars, which is very similar in articulation wise to these Palitoy Action Force, and we were using our Star Wars with GI Joe. We had no issue, if even if the scales were way off, we didn't mind. Sometimes He-Man would show up, but I was, as far as Action Man is concerned, I did find. So the one on the left there was the character that you voiced for me. You voiced that character for me in the Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship, the last one. Yes, a full force. And I had the torso floating around in a bin, like a parts bin, toy bin, not a rubbish bin, a parts bin. And I was like, oh, I should create an Action Man to go with the Slaughterhouse Wrestling Championship. Even before we came up with an idea of trying to get the two things together, the two lines together. But I've got the arms, the legs, the head, are all from different GI Joes. But I was in the garage yesterday, just mucking around, looking to see what I had in there, and I found the actual, I think it's Night Force Action Man on the right there. That's how he was supposed to originally come out back in, I don't know what year he came out. It's definitely got to be late 90s. But I didn't know I had it. I didn't know I had this other guy. He's basically just Tracker, the G.I. Joe Tracker, repainted with some camo and black legs with the G.I. Joe stamp on it.
Was this an official figure then? Did they actually
Yeah.
release a 3 3/4-inch Action Man?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
really cool.
That is Action Man. That is G.I. Joe Action Man. That's the one that they came out with. It is a repaint. but that's him. That's the official Action Man G.I. Joe.
You see, they can work together.
They can. And they would have in my household.
I was going to say the Palitoy, they were sort of the UK partners for Hasbro, but they also had a deal with Kenner. So when Kenner started producing the original Star Wars figures, there was actually Palitoy were using the Kenner molds over here. So if you ever manage to buy a Star Wars figure and it's either steel carded or it comes with the card, sometimes the seller will sell a loose figure with the card. Some of them will have a Palitoy stamp on them instead of a Kenner one, and they were made over here in the same factory that these characters came from.
Huh. Okay, that's pretty cool.
And as I said last time, we as kids we didn't know that the bendy figures, as we called them back then, we didn't know that they had come from Hasbro. We didn't know they were part of G.I. Joe. It was just they came in. This is interesting because I mentioned this in an email to you recently. When I first started going online and I began looking up things to do with Action Force, I did find well, one of the things that kind of scared me away from joining any of these groups is I stumbled across some American G.I. Joe fans, and they were pretty angry about Action Force, and it's not because of they're being stupid or anything like that. It's just that the information at the time wasn't available. People didn't know, and so there was a lot of these guys were saying things like, "Oh, how dare the evil British, perfidious Albion, here they come again, take a classic American icon, how can they take a classic American icon like G.I. Joe and change the name to Action Force? How dare they? They've changed the theme tune." No. That's not what happened. As I mentioned previously, Action Force previously existed. It was its own separate thing, and it became so popular so quickly that but even though Action Force had its own vehicles, they had vehicles specifically designed for these figures. You had like the AF5 multi-mission craft. It was like a road vehicle, but it was 4x4. It had pop-out wings so it could fly. It had an inflated collar around it so it could go in the water. So it was like not just a land vehicle, it was land, sea, and air, maybe even space. Who knows? So we already had the vehicles for these figures, but because it took off so quickly and became so popular in such a hurry, that Palitoy were able to use the good relationship they had with Hasbro to bring over some of the Hasbro vehicles to bulk out the Action Force range. They brought over some of the figures which were better suited to those vehicles, and again did their own versions of them. I just happen to have over here. Let's have a look. So they brought over Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe.
Let me bring you up.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for Action Force, he was molded in red plastic. It wasn't just a repaint. He was completely molded in red plastic to make this guy, Red Laser.
Oh, that's cool.
This one's mine. This one's actually my older brother's.
Yeah. Does he know you have all his toys?
Wait till you see what I've nicked from my younger brother.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we brought over some of the bendy figures to suit these vehicles, and so they had this good relationship going, whereby they were already selling these G.I. Joe figures, as it were, in Action Force as part of the range. And then in '85, when poor old Alfred Pallett of Palitoy, when he died, and the company was broken up and sold off, Hasbro took over sort of the intellectual properties of Palitoy, and that included Action Man and Action Force. But at this time, they wanted to start introducing G.I. Joe figures to the British and European market, and one or two other markets around the world where Palitoy was selling. And I strongly believe that this is the reason why they kept the Action Force name. they're trying to introduce a fantasy military 3 3/4 inch action figure range in a marketplace where Action Force is already supremely successful. You've already got a fantasy military range of action figures in a 3 3/4 inch scale. Hasbro at this point now owns both of these IPs. If they tried to release G.I. Joe at the same time that Action Force was still available, you're in effect going to be going into competition against yourself, or Hasbro would be going against themselves doing this. And that's, in business terms, that'd be suicide, you know. So I think that Hasbro, bear in mind, they're an American company. It wasn't a British decision. We weren't taking over anything. Hasbro made the business decision, purely business, I believe, to bring over the G.I. Joe figures and sell them in Action Force packets. And so from throughout 1985 and 86, you had the G.I. Joe figures being sold in the same style of card back as the Action Force figures we've been looking at. Then sort of during 86, when they closed up sort of the Palitoy branch of the operation over here, they then relaunched in 1987, and now it was purely Hasbro. It wasn't anything to do with Palitoy anymore. And the figures that came over in 1987 were now in a recognizably G.I. Joe style packaging, much like your Slaughterhouse logo. You've got the red, white, and blue, which of course is our flag as well. You've got the star logos. You've got the star logos and the font for the writing, the typeface. I remember on your recent live stream, you forgot that word as well.
What's that? Yeah. Font.
Yeah. Font, that's the word. Yeah. So,
I forget many words, mate.
Like, it gets worse as you get older. Trust me.
Yeah.
But even though the 1987 figures were now straight up Hasbro, they're still using the Action Force name, albeit using the G.I. Joe writing style, the font, and the iconography. So if someone visiting from the States had seen Action Force hanging on a peg in a toy shop, they would recognize the characters and they would recognize the packaging, even though it said Action Force. But that initial decision to sell G.I. Joes in Action Force packaging, I believe it was purely down to business, and Hasbro was the business in question, and they're an American company, so it wasn't us. And besides, we were only little kids at the time, so we wouldn't have been able to make any such decision, would we?
No. True. So we had, as far as I can remember, and we always had G.I. Joe, a real American hero, but I have seen a lot of international G.I. Joe cards for the figures that say G.I. Joe International Hero. And I always thought of G.I. Joes as international anyway. Recondo always seemed to me to be an Australian-looking character, even though in the file card he isn't. He did seem to be such. And then when they brought out the Australian exclusive comic, which is basically just reprints of G.I. Joe, they had them introduced with the character called Digger, who was basically just Recondo. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
On his file card, was his actual name Bruce?
Who? On Digger?
Digger, yeah.
I don't think Digger ever had an actual release, but he was just the beginning of the comic. He would introduce what was happening, and he'd be standing around like a little campfire thing with his his Billy going. I'll have to find the image and show you. It's genius in its execution, but very Australian. But it never occurred to me that it was a solely American thing anyway. Like, we had a lot of things here in Australia that were particularly American. You know, I grew up watching Sesame Street. It always confused me that they were saying Z at the end of the alphabet, and then I had to go to school and say Z. It's like, Z doesn't rhyme with anything. You're singing a rhyming song like the alphabet, and you have to end with Z. It doesn't make any sense.
No, but it does have a kind of a very abrupt sound. It does sound like an ending.
Yeah, it does.
It?
Yeah, it ends it. Yeah, it's like a full stop.
Yeah, that's it. No more.
Yeah,
Now
that's
go
it.
learn
We're
some
done.
numbers.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
it's interesting. It's interesting you brought up the Recondo being Australian. If I can cast my mind back, when like I said, that the Hasbro sort of started selling GI Joes and Action Force packets. This is about 85, 86. And then the comic book Battle Action Force, they sort of stopped. They had a particular story, which let me just have a quick flick through my book here.
Sure.
That's it. Operation Deep Cover. That was it. Operation Deep Cover. It was a very long story, but at the end of it, it was kind of this question mark left over Cobra's future. By this point, Baron Ironblood had become Cobra Commander. And
right. Look, I got it. Before I forget, I wanted to ask you something about, because Baron Ironblood, you told me in the last one, Baron Ironblood was like the transitional character from Action Force to the GI Joe characters, where he became Cobra Commander. So when you showed me Red Laser just now, who was a repaint of Cobra Commander, is Red Laser a named character? Who is he in that relationship then?
That's a good question. He was a completely separate character. Basically, I think in GI Joe it was called the Hal Cannon. It was a very large gun.
Right.
One of the Palitoy vehicles, when they brought out the individual teams and they created the enemy, the Red Shadows, they repurposed one of the Palitoy vehicles to make it a Red Shadow vehicle. And one of the alterations they made was to put a tow hook on the back of it. This tow hook was specifically so that you could place it with the Action Force version of the HAL cannon, which was brought over here, and it was made red and black, so it was part of the Red Shadows army. And this was actually called in the Action Force stories, it was called the Laser Exterminator.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very harsh sounding name.
Yeah.
This isn't a friendly. They're not a friendly organization, you know.
No.
And the figure, as I said, because of the GI Joe vehicles were tooled for figures with more articulation. The figure that came with the Laser Exterminator was actually Red Laser.
Okay.
Now, the interesting part of this story is that we didn't have the Laser Exterminator when I was a kid. My parents had tracked down the Shadow Track, which was the vehicle I just talked about with the tow hook at the back. They tracked down the Shadow Track from my brother, my older brother, and I think it was probably my dad had spotted that one of the examples of this toy on the shelf, they all had window boxes so you could see inside. One of them had a different figure than all the others.
Right.
You see the so you've got your standard Red Shadow, like this. The version that came with the Shadow Track, the one that came with the Shadow Track had black gloves. That was the only difference in terms of the makeup of the figure. The one with black gloves, and he was called Red Vulture, and he was a Frenchman. He was I think he was like a gangster's getaway driver, something like that. And he had joined the Red Shadows as their driver, and Red Vulture, came with the Shadow Track vehicle. But my parents had spotted that one of these Shadow Track vehicles had a different figure in it. And what had happened was, I guess someone at Palitoy had dropped the wrong figure in the box, because of my older brother was lucky enough to get this guy, Red Laser.
Right. So
Very
can
hard
you throw them both up together so I can both Red Laser, who'd you say, Red Vulture?
Red Vulture is who it's supposed to be.
Right.
this guy's red laser.
Right. And can you put the red guy that you just had up before? Can you put that side by side with the red laser character?
Yep.
Because it only occurred to me partway through that conversation when you held the other guy up that it wasn't the first guy you threw up. I was like, oh, that does look like Cobra Commander. And then I was like, hang on, he's got Action Force articulation.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can articulate. Yeah. Okay. So who's the guy with the Action Force articulation?
This is Red Shadow.
Oh, Red Shadow.
Is the name of the Red Shadow is the name of the soldiers of the enemy.
Oh, right.
So these guys were basically, nowadays you would call this an army builder. Back then, we didn't have such terms. We just knew that these were the baddie soldiers, and if you want ranks of soldiers, you need more of these guys. So these guys were filling up the ranks as the Red Shadow army. And like I said, for the driver of the Shadow track, basically the only variation was they gave him black gloves.
Well, he looks a lot like Cobra Commander too.
Yes. And for the Laser Exterminator, because the character would need to. I have to remember my actions are the wrong way around on camera. Have bended legs.
Yeah,
that's right. So they brought over this as a bendy figure, and he was supposed to come with the Laser Exterminator, but my older brother got lucky. Mum and Dad doing a good job there, spotted one with the red laser figure instead.
Well, there you go.
It was you talking about Recondo being Australian,
right?
That put me on the track because of as I said, once the Palitoy sort of Action Force came to an abrupt end, and they did this big story in the comics where there was like this question mark left over Cobra's future. Will Cobra be able to bounce back from this huge defeat? Spoiler alert: Action Force won the battle.
Perfect.
Will Cobra be able to make a comeback? And again, as little kids, we didn't know what was going on. There was no internet back then, and even if we had known, we probably wouldn't have understood it because we were only little kids. The Palitoy figures were becoming more and more scarce in the toy shops, even though they were starting to sell G.I. Joes in this packaging, red, white, and blue with the gold logo. Even those were starting to come up scarce. And the following week, my brother gets his comic book delivered. My younger brother had Dandy, which is a comedy comic that we have over here. I had the Marvel UK version of Transformers, and my older brother,
great series.
My older brother, he had Battle Action Force, but we all used to read each other's.
Of course, yeah,
we'll share them. And the
when you're getting along,
when we're getting along, the Battle Action Force comic arrived. Only Action Force was missing from the front cover. It just said Battle, which is the name that it had prior to Action Force.
Right.
And we didn't know why. We just thought, oh well, maybe they're taking a break. So the following week after that, again, Battle arrives. No Action Force comic strip, nothing. And this went on for quite some time. And then one day it would have been either late 1986 or early 87. This advert came on TV, and it started with some animation. It started with some cartoon images, and it was, we all jumped out of our skin. What the heck's this? We could see quite recognizably Cobra Commander, who we had known as the baddie from Action Force.
Right.
Cobra Commander, and I think if I remember correctly, there was some kind of battle in a swamp, like a fan boat or something like that. Excuse me. And people shooting laser beams back and forth. And suddenly it came up on the screen, Action Force. Only now it was the Hasbro logo, the logo like your Slaughterhouse logo. It still said Action Force. And we were like, wow, Action Force is back. It's been missing for like a year. Now suddenly it's back. And they were advertising the new toys, this time all bendy figures, because they were all the Hasbro figures. separate from the Action Force ones, the bendy figures we had previously. Although there were some crossovers. So, for example, so here we have a Cobra Trooper on his claw vehicle. But if you look at these stickers, this is the Action Force, the Palitoy Action Force version of Cobra.
Right.
So the color scheme is slightly different.
Yeah.
So we're watching this advert, and there's characters like this are showing up, and we're thinking, you know, there's him, there's Cobra Commander, there's these guys that we recognize from the Battle Action Force comic, but there's all these new characters as well. There's all these new people that we hadn't seen before, Bazooka, Quick Kick, guys like those, which we knew nothing about. So there's this cartoon element to the advert, and they're showing us the toys. And then when the newspaper was delivered, they put through the door a Marvel UK comic called Action Force. And I'm guessing that they just, you know, they knew my brother had a subscription to Battle Action Force comic. And I guess they just thought, well, this is weird. It's called Action Force. It's made by a different publisher, but it's the same thing. So they just shoved that through our door. And from that point on, he was getting Bat Action Force instead. Yeah, just automatically like that. We started having the new Action Force comic come through the door. Concurrently, the guys who had been making Battle Action Force, they well, basically because it was a Hasbro product now, and Hasbro had G.I. Joe, they already had a pre-existing relationship with Marvel Comics, who did the comic book and the cartoon. So that's the reason why the guys making Battle Action Force weren't able to continue with it, because of the new owner, as it were. Hasbro already had an existing relationship with Marvel, so naturally the comic book license would go to them.
Right, of course.
So the guys making Battle Action Force now had this kind of gaping vacuum in the middle of their comic. So I think they were kind of clever in what they did. They scrambled quickly, and within a few months they had come up with something called Storm Force. And instead of it being hundreds and hundreds of operatives like an Action Force, it would be a small team, and these new characters would each sort of represent like all the characters of Action Force rolled up into just a handful of a small team of people. And the main character was very much in the sort of Eagle or Skip kind of mold, very tough military guy wearing combats. For a sci-fi element, he had a mechanical hand that he could change for like a flamethrower or whatever. So
that's cool.
Yeah, and that provided you know, some entertainment for Action Force starved kids. You know, so we liked Storm Force. We thought that was cool. I remember there was a character, I think his name was Porcupine, and his whole suit was covered in knife blades. Now, as a kid, I just thought Porcupine looked awesome. Looking at it as an adult, you kind of think that's incredibly impractical. I think if they were to make that character today, I think what they'd do is maybe give him a ghillie suit with some spines pointing through it. But to have be dressed head to toe in knives, not very practical. But yeah, the characters looked awesome. They had this female character called Stiletto, and she was all into like knives and darts and weapons you could throw. And of course, she wore stiletto heels while she was busy kicking butt. You know. So yeah, the guys who did Battle Action Force, I think they did well to cope with the changing situation, and they came up with Storm Force. Meanwhile, Marvel UK, as I said, we didn't know about the G.I. Joe connection at the time. We didn't know about Hasbro or any kind of Americanization. But what Marvel UK were doing was they would take the G.I. Joe stories that had been previously published in the States and just change all the names to like Action Force instead of G.I. Joe, and they would change like the origin of some of the characters to make them more international. They also, the Marvel UK officers were also making their own original stories separate from the US ones. And in this new version of Action Force, Flint was the main character. And the characters, the origins were for many of them was different to in G.I. Joe. Just to quickly mention the advert again, like I said, it had that cartoon element to it. as kids, we had seen the Transformers cartoon. That had been advertised on TV. You'd seen He-Man advertised on TV. There was a Master of the Universe cartoon. So when we saw this advert, not only did we think new toys, new comic perhaps, but we also thought, because there was this cartoon element in the advert, chances are that meant there'd be a cartoon as well. So we all thought we were going to get this cool new Action Force cartoon. We thought all these characters we've been following for the past few years, we're going to see them come to life on the screen, and it didn't happen. It wasn't broadcast over here. Found out years later, as I got back into collecting, that a lot of the episodes had been released on video cassette in the UK.
Yeah.
So I went back and I found a whole bunch of video cassettes of Action Force. And as we see in your overdub video, you'll have a character talking, and then instead of the classic "Yo Joe," suddenly the voice will change completely, and you'll hear someone say, you know, "Gee, Scarlet, it's time for us to get a move on." Really badly dubbed on. you know, you know, instead of "Yo Joe," you get full force dubbed on. But the strange thing was when I started watching those episodes of the cartoon, again, not knowing that they had previously been G.I. Joe, it was quite a surprise to discover all the characters, well, all the good guy characters, I should say, speaking with American accents, because of having read the Marvel UK comic. Flint was, according to the comic, he was English. And going back to Palitoy, when Palitoy first started using the Hasbro figures to bulk out the line, Ripcord, I have my original Ripcord here. There he is. He was from, I always forget, I always get Birmingham and Manchester mixed up, but suffice to say he's from the north of the Midlands. So he would have a strong kind of accent, an English accent, and yet here he is on the cartoon speaking with an American accent. And at first I didn't know why, and I was kind of surprised. All the characters are speaking with these American accents, you know. And I was expecting Recondo. When I saw him, I was expecting him to have an Australian accent. And if you go back to, if I refer back to my book written by Jim the Baron Marshall, this has all the Palitoy fact files for these characters. And if you look up Recondo, it does say that here he is. He comes from Melbourne, Australia.
Well,
he's
there
from
you go.
Melbourne. So as a kid, I always expected him to be Australian. And when we first started seeing the Action Force cartoon, I was completely taken aback to hear him speak with an American accent. Not because of any kind of, you know, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. There's no anti-American sentiment here.
Sure.
You know, Space Commander Chuck Connors, this little guy over here, he's supposed to be from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Well, there you go.
But because all the characters in the Battle Action Force and then the Marvel UK Action Force were international, that's the kind of broad range of accents I was expecting. And to hear them all just be American was kind of surprising. But then now that we're older, we know, and knowing's half the battle, we know it's because it was originally G.I. Joe. They were merging G.I. Joe and Action Force together. And one of the changes that was made was the origin of the characters.
So it's always funny to watch those Action Force cartoon dubs where they have their original voice, and then it sounds like it's almost just one actor doing the other voices, doing his best to try and do other voices. I don't know if that's true or not, but they don't sound that they don't differentiate very, very much. But you do see the vehicles and so forth still have G.I. Joe written all over it.
Yeah.
You know, which obviously, you know, you can't really change just for animation purposes, but you know, that would have been confusing to a bunch of kids, I'm sure.
That's when I first started to put the pieces together. Because as a kid, we were reading, like I say, the Marvel UK Action Force comic. They were doing their own stories, but they were also reprinting G.I. Joe stories. Now, we didn't know about G.I. Joe over here at the time, but we had heard in pop culture references to this character G.I. Joe. So when I was reading the sort of anglicized version of G.I. Joe, and as I say, they had covered up the name G.I. Joe in the speech bubbles and on the title and put Action Force instead. But somewhere along the line, I guess they missed it. I remember it was one of the vehicles. I think it might have been the Ore Striker Jeep, or maybe it was the Silver Mirage bike. It was one of the vehicles anyway. It had this G.I. Joe logo down the side. And I saw this as a kid, and it had the red, white, and blue and the stars, the same as the Action Force logo that Hasbro was using. And that's when the penny dropped. I was like, oh, something's going on here. This is why it's different to Battle Action Force. And although we didn't have the full story yet, I began to put the pieces together and realized that there was something going on here, something more intrinsically American. And that's kind of where I began to see the merging of the two come together. But it's interesting what you were saying about the voice actors. If I just quickly refer back to my handy dandy cassette tapes. Now, if my older brother is watching, this is not your one. If my older brother's watching, this is not your one. This one I bought off eBay. So your one is still safe and sound somewhere, but this is mine. I got it off eBay. Okay. But anyway, they as I said last time, I'll try not to say pull their punches anymore because I said that enough on the last video. But the stories were quite rough and tough, shall we say? And so
they didn't pull their punches, did they?
They did not pull their punches one little bit. So on this first cassette, the story, it's a full cast drama. It's not a story being read by a narrator. It's a full drama with music and sound effects. And
cool.
it's all taken very very seriously, you know. Although it is, you know, the cynical way of looking at it would be, well, basically it's an advert for a range of toys. Well, that's true, but it was also the story was taken, the content was taken very seriously. Now the same actors, because I recognize the voices, when they start to transition to Hasbro. We have one here. The first one came with an inlay card and a box and everything, but after that they didn't. We have Operation Liberty, and it has the Palitoy Action Force logo on it.
Hang on a sec. Then can you show me that again?
Yep. Okay, so it's got the Palitoy Action Force logo on it, and this is when they start to sell American G.I. Joes in the British red, white, and blue Action Force Palitoy packaging. And then we transition again.
Hang on a second. Oh, I see. Yeah.
This is when Hasbro sort of takes over completely after poor old Alfred Pallet died and the company was broken up and sold off. And now they're using this logo, which even though it's an Action Force and not G.I. Joe, any G.I. Joe fan looking at that would recognize it immediately that this is something to do with G.I. Joe. Now the funny thing is, they were using the same cast as this one because I recognize the voices. But by the time we get to this one, the tone is completely changed. It's much more played for laughs. It's much more comedy. You do have like the British version of Flint on there. Bizarrely, Snake Eyes is talking, and he has a kind of a. These days, it probably wouldn't be allowed because I'm pretty sure it's a white guy trying to do a Far Eastern accent.
Right.
Playing. These days, you're probably getting a lot of trouble for that. But you know, we didn't have that many. We didn't have such a wide variety of actors back in the '80s as we do now. So you know, I guess they just made do with what they had. You'll hear like I think it was Scarlett again speaking with a British accent. But yeah, the tone was very different. There's a part at the beginning of the story where the idea is that Cobra has caused this satellite in space to malfunction and to crash down onto the Earth, and you hear people down on the ground just going about their business, and suddenly they look up and see this flaming object coming towards them, and they have this comedy moment where the two of these characters go, maybe we should run, and you hear them scuttling off, and it's huge explosion.
Wow.
And then mere seconds later, you hear this news report. You hear it on the radio, sort of being tuned in, and it goes, you know, you know, huge explosion. The death toll is numbered in that, and then the radio kind of crackles out, so you don't hear how many people. But just a minute ago, or a few seconds ago,
Yeah.
this was a big comedy item. Now you're
Yeah.
talking about the death toll is catastrophic and
Wow.
numbers in dozens or hundreds. Yeah. But what are you doing? If you know, I'd expect something that kind of rough and tough to be in a Palitoy show,
Yeah.
but this kind of comedy version that they came up with for Action Force,
Mm.
again with Baron Ironblood in the first cassette I showed you, very dark and serious, very kind of powerful performance. Even though it's only a character from a kid's toy range, the guy playing the character really gives it his all. You know.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
comic books tell us that he and Cobra Commander are the same guy.
Mm.
Then we get to Cobra Commander in the Hasbro cassette, and it's a different actor, and I don't know if he had heard Chris Latter's performance from the cartoon, or if he was just coming up with a character off his own back. But he tries to do kind of a high-pitched shrill voice. Now,
Right.
if you're doing that and it sounds raw and ragged coming out of the voice box, a high-pitched screechy voice can sound intimidating. But if you're just doing a kind of a screechy falsetto,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not intimidating.
No.
And so we had this very serious Baron
Yeah.
Ironblood, and now
Mm.
he's this high-pitched kind of falsetto-y Cobra
Yeah.
Commander. It's like, oh, bring back the Baron, please.
That's great. So
But then when we eventually did see the cartoon, we did see that he was a tough villain after all.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the funny things in the Action Force redubs was that they couldn't use or didn't want to use Sergeant Slaughter as a name because it was deemed too aggressive or violent, and so they changed it to Sergeant Slammer. Sergeant Slammer in the Slammer House.
Yeah.
But then in the opening credits, it still says in G.I. Joe the movie, it still said Sergeant Slaughter as Sergeant Slaughter. They didn't bother changing the opening credits for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
As I said, with the G.I. Joe name would show up on the side of vehicles, not only in the
Mm.
comic book, but in the videos as well. As I said, when I managed to catch some of the video cassettes years later, and I started watching them, you would see on the side of the vehicles, it would still have the G.I. Joe banner. And I guess it's easier to change, you know, audio dubbing in a
Oh, yeah.
film or TV show than it is to change something actually in an animation cell. So
That's true.
yeah, you're quite right. So yes, the name Sergeant Slammer. That's kind of how you and I met, talking
Yes, true.
talking about this transitional phase. This is how we ended up talking over the internet, and here we are.
Sarge bringing people together internationally, whether it's a slaughter or a
Yes.
slammer. Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll leave it there. But I do want to give you a sneak peek at what we'll be looking at first next week, and I've managed to pull out this guy next, and so I've set him up next to Muton, and yeah, I can see the similarities. So we'll do a deep dive into this character on the next show.
I see what you did there.
That's great. This is why I do this. Yeah. Yeah. But in the meantime, I'm gonna send this guy your way, so you've got an official G.I. Joe Action Man. So we're further breaching to expand upon this Action Force / G.I. Joe relationship by sending you this official Action Man G.I. Joe, amongst other things that'll be coming your way. Least I can do, considering the amount of Action Force Palitoy stuff I've got coming with me. Oh yes,
he shall have
these two guys.
Have a place of honor.
These two guys, I reckon, will go well together.
Yep, they shall live together on my shelf.
Perfect, excellent, sounds good to me. All right, mate, we'll do this again shortly for a part 3, and yeah, it was great hanging out again, man. I love it.
Anytime.
All right, well, you're dismissed. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment down below.